All right, people are slowly coming in. Numbers are slowly increasing. Hello, everyone. As you're coming in, I may have to repeat myself again, but please let us know where you're tuning in from, or let us know what brought you here today, how many Preston Child books you've read, or how long you've been reading their books, anything, just to start off that conversation in the chat. We're about halfway to our number here. Yeah, let us know where you're tuning in from. Oh, there we go.
Hi, Linda. Hi, Carol.
Arizona, Central Illinois, New York. Also, please remember when you put things in the chat, just change it to everyone so we can all see it. Otherwise, it'll just go to the three of us.
Emily, Seth, Heather, hello. I better shut up.
And we're still waiting for a few more people, but the numbers haven't increased. Let me just check my email to make sure everyone is getting in okay. I don't see any concerned emails. So why don't we get started and folks will come in when they come in. Oh, we even have someone from the UK. Wow, it's late there. I was just there, so I remember the time zone difference. Hello, everyone. If this is your first time here, I'll introduce myself. I'm Omar Acevedo, and I'm the Literary Program Coordinator at the Mark Twain House and Museum in Hartford, Connecticut. And thank you so much for joining us for this virtual program for Dead Mountain. First, I want to thank our sponsors. Our virtual programs are produced in part with support honoring the late Frank Lord. We are very happy to honor his memory with these programs. And we are also incredibly grateful to the Wish You Well Foundation and Connecticut Public WNPR for supporting all of our virtual programs. Please consider supporting our museum by becoming a member if you're not already. I'm sure there are lots of members in our audience. But if you haven't become a member, all members receive free admission to our author programs, free admission to the house and museum, year-round discounts in the store and cafe, and much more. Please visit our website for more information. And if you're interested in any of our future virtual programs, you can go onto our website or any of our social media to see what is coming up. We have a very busy schedule this fall, so please join us again. Now on to our guests. Our authors are Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child. Their thrillers, quote, stand head and shoulders above their rivals, according to Publishers Weekly. And Preston and Child's Relic and the Cabinet of Curiosities were chosen by readers in a National Public Radio poll as being among the 100 greatest thrillers ever written, and Relic was made into a #1 box office hit movie. They are authors of the famed Pendergast series, and their recent novels include The Cabinet of Dr. Lang, Diablo Mesa, Bloodless, The Scorpion's Tail, and Crooked River. In addition to his novels, Preston is the author of the award-winning nonfiction book, The Lost City of the Monkey God. And Child is a Florida resident and a former book editor who has published 8 novels of his own, including such bestsellers as Chrysalis and Deep Storm. Now, as I said earlier, we encourage you to have a conversation in the chat. If you have a specific question, you can post that directly into our Q&A section. That's at the bottom left of the screen. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, I will be putting a link in the chat to purchase Dead Mountain through our museum store. Your purchase will support our museum and our honored guests. So that is all from me. I will turn this over to Douglas and Lincoln. Please sit back and enjoy.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Omar. I just want to start by thanking the Mark Twain House and Museum. Lincoln and I visited the Mark Twain House and Museum some years ago, and this is where Mark Twain wrote his most important books, the Roughing It, The Life on the Mississippi, Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn. It is fantastic, and they have these wonderful author programs. I don't know why we were invited, but anyway, it is a wonderful program. And so anyway, so I want to thank the Mark Twain House for hosting us.
And I'd like to thank not only the Mark Twain House, but all the people who've shown up and paid to come and listen to us blather. It's great to see people from Rochester, Minnesota. I was there recently, Connecticut, Utah, the UK, all over the place. And I want to let you know that if I vanish suddenly, or if the roof collapses, it's because there's a hurricane going on, and I'm not totally sure that my power will hold out. But let's see what happens.
All right. So so we're here to talk about our new novel, Dead Mountain, which is in the Nora Kelly series. And it features Nora Kelly and Corrie Swanson, who's a young FBI agent just starting in the Albuquerque field office. And Nora Kelly, of course, is a long-term character of ours who comes out of the Pendergast series. And she is an archaeologist with the Santa Fe Institute of Archaeology. So, and this is, I think, the fourth book in that series, but it's a standalone novel. You don't have to read any of the other books. It's where did the novel come from?
It came from well, let me back up a little bit and say where the series came from. You know, we've written many books about Agent Pendergast, and he's our most well-liked protagonist, but we've also had other, like Gideon Crew as heroes in other books. And Doug and I, when Gideon's service was over, his memorial service, we began to talk about who else we should write about, because we felt we had so many characters we built up. And right away we realized that we had two people who would play big roles in the Pendergast books. Nora Kelly, the archaeologist, who we first saw in Thunderhead, which is not a Pendergast book, and then in Cabinet of Curiosities, and Corrie Swanson, who made her debut in Still Life with Crows. And they've both been in many Pendergast books. And we said they're both strong female characters. They make great protagonists. They happen to, well, Nora is in Santa Fe, which Doug knows very well. And what's more, we know them, and they really work well together. An archaeologist and a fledgling FBI agent, we can stick her in the Albuquerque office, and they'd have things to investigate together, and they could butt heads because they're both very strong personalities. And so what started out as just a flyer for us, we gave it a shot with the book Old Bones, where they investigate the Donner Party, had proved to be a really popular series, not only with our readers, but with us, because we like both of them very much. And we've tried very hard in almost all the books to include, if not real life mysteries, like the Donner Party, mysteries that are very close to being real. In this case, it was a real mystery, and a most bizarre one you can imagine. And since Doug first covered it, I'll let him explain it to you.
Well, I might just mention I was in the UK. I saw that we have several people from the UK listening, and I was walking down the street in London, and I saw a store, a little restaurant that said Donner kebabs. So I had to go in. They were delicious. Anyway, all right, never mind.
Did you get dark meat or white meat, Doug?
They were delicious. Anyway, yeah, the Donner Party, as you know, well, we won't go there. All right, back to Dead Mountain. The genesis of this book was I write articles for the New Yorker magazine, and I wrote a piece about this really bizarre mystery that occurred in the Soviet Union in 1959. It's one of the greatest mysteries that still continues today from the old Soviet Union. Nine cross-country skiers went on a long winter cross-country ski trip across the Ural Mountains, and they disappeared. and they organized a search, and they found the most bizarre scene that has never been explained. Their tent was slashed open in the side. They ran out into the snow in bare feet in 40 below zero weather, and they all froze to death. And some had very bizarre injuries. They had burns, little cuts. Some had crushed chests, missing their eyes, their tongue, really bizarre. So I wrote up this story, and it was published in the New Yorker. You can find it if you go to the New Yorker. But I got a movie deal from a really big studio, really great movie deal. And they sent me the contract to sign. And the day that it arrived, Russia invaded Ukraine, and the movie company pulled out of the deal. So Link, being the brilliant partner that he is, said to me, "Don't worry, Doug, we will write a novel based on this story ourselves." And so we started brainstorming, and we came up with this, I think, a really wonderful idea, which everyone thinks. My wife thinks it's the best book I've ever written. Anyway, and all my cousins bought the book. No. Anyway, so we wrote this book. We moved the setting to the Manzano Mountains of New Mexico, and there was a reason for that. Most of you have never heard of the Manzano Mountains, but you should know them, because buried deep in those mountains is the largest arsenal of nuclear weapons in the world, owned by the Air Force. These are all the reloading weapons for during World War III, when they have to reload. I mean, the whole concept is kind of ridiculous. But anyway, so that plays a role. I can't say what it is. And also the history of the Manhattan Project, which was also part of this story. Not in Los Alamos, but outside of Albuquerque, there was also part of the Manhattan Project going on, very top secret. That's part of the story as well. So,
and also something many people don't know about is the fact there was and still is, a presidential bunker up on the Air Force Base, where who was it? Which president was it? Truman?
It was President Truman,
and was gonna hunker down with his staff in case of a nuclear attack, but then the Russians tested the Tsar Bomba, which was the most massive H-bomb ever exploded on the surface anyway, and they realized that bunker wouldn't do any good, and so it was abandoned except for storage, I think, but we put it to very good use in the store.
That's right. So there's a lot of history, and it's all true. One of our signatures, I think, as writers, is that we incorporate a lot of really actual, real history into our novels. And this, this whole thing about the bunker and this connection to the Manhattan Project has never been written about, and you're not going to see it in the movie Oppenheimer either. It's a whole interesting side branch. Anyway, so
what really is interesting is how we got started as a writing team, because it's until recently when there seemed to be people who were dragging their brothers into writing teams and things like that in the last couple of years. When we started our own career, it was unheard of, for fiction anyway. Nobody could understand how two people could possibly write a novel together, or if they did, how it would be any good. But I was working at the at St. Martin's Press as an editor, and I was a big fan of the Museum of Natural History, and I went there on weekends. My wife was a docent. I was a member got all the behind-the-scenes tours, and I thought to myself that when I retired, it would be great to write the real history of the place, because those behind-the-scenes tours don't show you anything. The most they show you is a peek behind the curtain where the interesting stuff is going on. And then I realized, what an idiot I was. My job was to generate books, generate material, content. So I found Doug Yes, there really is a room, Heather. I'll get to that in a moment. Uh, I looked for somebody who knew a lot about the museum, who could write a history of it. And looking through their magazine, I found this guy, Doug Preston, who wrote a lot of articles about the place. And I tapped him to write a book about the museum, which he was happy to do because he was ready to move on to longer format writing. And that became Dinosaurs in the Attic. Um, and the one thing that where I was really a problem to Doug was I kept pestering him for a behind the scenes tour. And he said, I can't do that. I mean, this is back in the 80s. And even then, there was security that was pretty heavy. And so he finally agreed. And I think I'll let Doug tell that story.
Well,
Be sure you mention the whale eyeballs, Doug.
all right, I'm going to talk about the whale eyeballs first. Someone asked a question, is there really a room full of whale eyeballs? And the answer is yes. There was a curator there who was a mammologist who was very interested in whales, and he collected whale eyeballs. He was interested in how they could see, their ocular abilities. And I went into this room, and there are these jars, thousands of them, each one with a giant whale ball in it, staring at you. It was like, what the? I couldn't believe my eyes. But
It tastes like chicken.
That's not even the beginning of how strange this was. He also collected whale skeletons. And, a whale skeleton, the really big whales, you can't put those bones on the ground because they will deform, they will break. So they hung these skeletons, the bones, the old museum powerhouse that had been this huge room. They hung these whale skeletons. And I don't know if that still exists, but I went in this room and there are all these whale skeletons hanging. Anyway, it was really impressive. So wait, what was the question, Link? I've now lost the thread.
How I insisted on a behind the scenes tour.
Oh yes,
of my own, a real tour.
That's right. He said, Doug, I published this book of yours. You got to do me a favor. So anyway, I realized that I could give him a tour late at night. It'd be really cool when all the lights were out. Only the emergency lighting was on. So I took him around the museum at midnight, and we ended up in the Hall of Late Dinosaurs, the Cretaceous dinosaurs, at 2 a.m. And Lincoln turned to me and he said, Doug, my God, this is the scariest building in the world. We've got to write a thriller set in this building. I said, Link, I don't know anything about writing thrillers. And he said, well, I do, because I've read so many bad manuscripts. I know exactly what not to do. So anyway, I just have to finish this story. At a certain point, while we were talking loudly about this thriller we were going to write that was going to finally make us famous authors, which, by the way, became The Relic, a voice rang out. A security guard was standing in the door of this hall, is outlined by the light behind him. He was like shining a light in on us, saying, who's there? Who's that talking? And I swear to God, his knees were knocking together. And I said, oh my God, I'm in trouble now. I'm a museum employee. I'm going to be fired. But Lincoln said, no, Doug, let me handle this. And Lincoln said to the guard, thank God you found us. Thank God. We've been wandering around this museum for hours. How do you get out of here? And the guard said, well, wait a minute. The museum closed at 5 p.m. It's 2 a.m. You've been lost all this time. Don't we know it? Oh my God, we can't find our way out. This is a nightmare. So the security guard escorted us out of the museum and never checked our IDs or anything else. So anyway, I thought to myself, oh boy, this guy, if you need a partner, this is the guy.
The Hall of Birds is like probably the most boring place in that whole museum. But at night, with all those stuffed eyeballs, when the light is low in these shadows cast by all the thousands of birds staring at you, reproachfully, it's not quite as boring as it is during the day.
Yeah, well, we found the museum to be a very good uh, setting for a number of our novels, especially the Cabinet of Curiosities, which, yeah, that was a crazy book.
So we decided to write The Relic, and of course we knew the odds were against us, just because I was in publishing and I knew how hard it was. Whether or not you had connections, the book has to stand or fall on its own at the end of the day. And we both had other jobs of our own. Doug had moved out to Santa Fe and was writing nonfiction books. So this book plodded along, and after 3 or 4 years, we finished it, found an agent, and then every publisher in New York turned it down. And to the point where Doug said, I've got to keep my my Blue Highways a sequel career going here, and good luck with it, Doug, if it ever gets published. And a few months later, I heard back from our agent who said, we have a publisher. And I called Doug and said, well, I just want to let you know that I'm going to go ahead of the book. And he said, okay, partner, when do we start? So the first
No, actually, sorry, I got to interrupt you. I said, how much money are they offering? And Link told me the sum. And I said, oh my God, put my name back on the book. I'm in. I mean, it wasn't that much money, but at the time I had absolutely zero funds. The starving writer.
And then we had to go through a horrible editorial process where all the sins I committed on so many authors as an editor were visited upon me tenfold by this person who cut our book down by like 40% and made us rewrite the last half of it. And it finally emerged as a finished book. And then came the conversation, should this be by Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child? Honestly, my name should have come first alphabetically, but he had a paltry number of books written at the time, and so that they thought there was more name recognition there. Or should it be by a pseudonym? And actually, in England, it did come out under a pseudonym. I think Lincoln Preston for the first several books. Luckily, they left our names on it, and it came out in a hardcover, and all of our families read it and liked it, as Doug said. But we had some pretty rough goings. There was a book signing I did at the Harvard Coop where only Doug's mom showed up, and he did a signing at, I think, the Mall of America, where only my family showed up. So it was pretty tough slogging there. Even though we had a movie coming out for when the paperback came out, it took us 5 books to realize that the agent Pendergast, who was in that book, but not the major character necessarily, he was our best character around at the time. And we brought him back in Cabinet of Curiosities, and we basically haven't looked back since.
Well, I just saw a question go by there that said, is Agent Pendergast based on anybody? And yes, he is. He's based on me. Note the white hair, the very handsome
your dreams.
features, the high IQ. I mean, it's just, right, Link?
Pendergast would never wear that tie with that shirt, I'm afraid.
Well, where's your tie? I mean, don't you have respect for Mark Twain, the greatest American author? Look at you with an alligator shirt. I mean,
I'm comfortable in my own skin, and besides, I'm in Florida during a hurricane, so give me some slack.
Anyway, but getting back to that question, let me just answer how Pendergast came about, because it was kind of a curious thing. So I wrote the first few chapters of Relic, and I sent them to Lincoln, and he called me up. He said, Doug, these are great. They're a great job, but there's a problem. You've got these 2 cops. One is like Irish American, one's Italian American. And you know what? They're exactly the same character. And they're kind of standard. He said, I think we should come up with a detective who's completely original, unlike anything anyone has done before. And by this point, I was so pissed off at him for not liking, so I very sarcastically said, "Oh, you mean like an albino from New Orleans?" And Lincoln said, "No, Doug, let's just work with that. This is a true story. I'm not making this up. Let's work with that." So we started brainstorming this character. We said, "Okay, well, let's give him a black suit, and let's make him very pale, not albino, but just pale. And so that when he's at a murder scene, they think he's the coroner because he's got this black suit. He's cadaverous appearance." And then we went on, make him an FBI agent, but he's independently wealthy and, sort of a maverick. And anyway, so that's how Pendergast came about.
I think Doug was still angry when he wrote that first draft of Pendergast in that first chapter, because he really was not like any other FBI agent or even law enforcement agent that I've ever read about or known. I mean, he was comparing the blood spatters to paintings by Jackson Pollock, and just making these comments that would be a little bit aloof and kind of cynical, and just poised. And I immediately fell in love with the character, and I made him even more over the top than he already was. And eventually he told us that we'd polished him enough, and we didn't need to make him any stranger. He was eccentric enough as it was, and he's remained more or less the same since.
Yes,
right, Doug?
that's exactly right. So anyway, that was where Pendergast came from. And we after we did The Relic, that was just going to be a one-off. And then Paramount Pictures made it into a movie. And I'm curious to know what our audience here thinks of the movie. I will just say this. When the movie came out, our Hollywood agent called us up and said, "Have you read paragraph 637 of your movie contract?" And we said, "No." He said, "Well, you should read it." And I said, "I don't want to read it. Paraphrase it." He said, "Well, to paraphrase it, it says, if you criticize the movie, even in casual conversation, you will be liable not only to return the money that you've been paid, but you will be liable up to the cost of the film, which is $50 million. So to answer the question, did we like the movie? We loved the movie. Not.
Even though
Is this
Pendergast,
being recorded?
yes, even though Pendergast ended up on the cutting room floor, he was in the early drafts. I'd like to answer a question brought up earlier about Constance Green, because this is one of our most misunderstood, but beloved by us, and I think our readers, characters. She first came into being in the Cabinet of Curiosities, which involved a person who was trying to extend his lifespan from the 19th century for a horrible experiment that he wanted to perfect, which I won't go into now. But after the hardcover was published, one of our readers said, he should have had somebody else that he tried that on that was lived longer, and or something along those lines. And we decided we can take a variant of that idea and add it to the book. It does make sense that why would he be the only person to have lived all that time? And so we added this character, Constance Green, who was the last person Lang, the guy from the 19th century, the doctor, tried his experiment on, found out that it worked, and he kept her as his ward in his house on Riverside Drive all those years. And she aged very slowly. And then, of course, Lang something happened to him in cabinet, and she became Pendergast ward, but she looks 22, although she's aging normally now. The problem was we didn't have her in the hardcover of the book. So Doug and I put our heads together, because she appeared in the next novel, in Still Life with Crows, and became more and more of a fixture as the books went on. And so what we did in the paperback was, when Lang was walking down an alleyway in the basement, we inserted a single sentence of the pair of eyes following him. And we thought, okay, now we've covered our bases. We've put her into the book, even if it's just a pair of eyes. No one's going to notice that in the paperback, and we can always refer back to it later on. And of course, we had umpteen emails asking, what was that pair of eyes that I happened to see mentioned in the paperback? So anyway, to circle around and answer your question, she can be very confusing to people who have not read about her before, but she will be in the next book, After the Cabinet of Dr. Leng, which we're writing right now, called The Angel of Vengeance, and which we are making great progress on. And we're very excited about it.
That's right. Someone is asking when that book will be published, and I don't think we know the answer. I think probably in June of next year, but they haven't scheduled it yet because we haven't turned it in yet. We're very close to finishing. So
that's our story.
yeah, but anyway, I mean, should we open this up to questions, Link? What do you think? I'm seeing a lot of really good questions in the chat here.
Sure. Otherwise, we can talk about what great fellows we are, and
talk about our arguments. We can talk about all our arguments.
Yeah, our various collecting habits, of art or pens, watches. But no, I see our friend in the top of the window. You want to throw us a lifeline here?
Sure. So yes, we have a lot of questions. You might have addressed some of them already. I'll just sort of start from the top in the Q&A section. Do you have
why don't Doug and I answer them alternately?
what was that?
Why don't Doug and I answer them alternately?
Oh, okay. That sounds good. The first question is from Charlie. He asks, do you have a forensic anthropologist as an advisor? Because Nora seems pretty true to life.
All right, do you want me to answer that? Well, yes.
Yes.
I know a forensic pathologist at he's at the Mayo Clinic, believe it or not, brilliant guy named Ross Zumwalt. And he published a book called Zumwalt's Pathology. And this is a beautiful book, giant, lots of color photographs. You do not want to look at these photographs, but they are very detailed. And so he has advised us on certain, intricate problems of pathology and so forth. And also, I used to work at the Museum of Natural History, where I knew a physical anthropologist named Harry Shapiro, who taught me a lot when I was young about bones and what you can tell from them, how you can, how you can tell not only how they died, but what diseases they might have had, and all kinds of things you can tell from looking at bones. So, and Link, did you want to add anything to that?
That was a good answer. No, I think he did a great job. I mean, Doug and I each write to our strengths, and sometimes those are things we already know about, whether it be music or history or mathematics or whatever, or computers. But often we also happen to have a large circle of friends or acquaintances we can tap to help with the research, because for us it's really important to get the research right for two reasons, really. The first reason is readers are very smart, and some authors don't give them credit for that. And they can sniff out when you're faking or when you've done a poor job. And it's a real turnoff. We want people to learn something from our books. And often we learn things too in the process of the research. The second reason is if we can build a strong foundation, scientific foundation, or a credible one, then we can take it to directions of our own, and the reader will hopefully suspend their disbelief. I mean, take Relic, for example. Once we've introduced the museum in a very believable way, talked about its scientific background, then in chapter 30, we can introduce the brain-eating monster, and our readers, will go along with us.
Yeah, they'll
But it's
send us
true.
emails saying the monster ate your brains. No,
We've gotten a couple of or a couple of people have asked the same question. I'm sure this is a question you receive a lot. Just for the sake of our audience, how do you actually do the writing? Who writes what, and how does the editing work with two people?
It's a process that has changed a lot over time, and as technology has changed, and as Doug and I, our relationship together has matured as co-writers. Originally, Doug wrote the lion's share of the chapters, and I did most of the outlines and the rewriting and the editing. And we corresponded by very primitive email tools and by fax, if you can believe it. And also, for a while we were both in New York, so it was easier to get together. But then he moved to Santa Fe, and it became difficult. But over time, our relationship has developed into a formula that really seems to work. I mean, hopefully it worked from the beginning, but it's easier for us now. And what happens is we plot out the book together, but we do it in a way that doesn't box us in, so the ending is still organic. We can still move in one direction or the other. And then we brainstorm, like Act 1, for example, the first 12 or 15 chapters, and then we assign them. Once we've argued about these chapters and brainstormed enough so we're both satisfied with where the story is going, we then assign each other chapters. And we don't do 1, 2, 3, 4. It wouldn't work. It would be too jarring. It would take too long. What we do is we assign each other sequences of chapters, sequences involving a certain character or a certain a group of actions. And then once we've written those, we each reread and edit the other person's work, sometimes insisting they rewrite it to a degree. And then eventually we take a literary Zamboni over the whole thing and polish it and move on to the next section of chapters. And so by the end, hopefully, over 40 books, or no, 36 books, we've learned a lot from each other's styles. The styles of our joint books and the way we write them is different from our solo books to a degree. And unless people can tell us differently, they seem to be very smooth and effortless in terms of the man behind the curtain, so to speak. And that's because we enjoy working together, and we don't get our egos up, in a bunch. We listen to what each other has to say, and we pay attention. And so far it's worked.
Hey, this is a really interesting question from Savannah. Have you ever, the person, not the place, have you guys ever mourned one of your own characters?
Yes.
did you say mourned?
Yes.
Well, we did mourn the poor demise of Smithback. And he really, I love Smithback. And I don't know why he
Don't
had
blame it on me. Don't blame it on me.
No, it was Link's fault. He said he's annoying. Let's kill this guy. No, but talk about mourning characters. I'd like to talk about, Link's got the hots for Nora Kelly.
No, I don't.
No, yes, he does. Oh, have I got that wrong?
Yeah,
Or is it Constance?
yeah.
All right, he has the hots for anyway.
So,
I mean, we are overly emotionally involved with our characters. It's very unhealthy. Anyway, we won't go more into that. I really like
but
Corrie. I think Corrie is just fabulous. But
yeah, it's a good dynamic because I like Nora better, and as a character, not as a as a person. And Doug likes Corey and she has a backstory with him, in terms of creating her character. But to answer your question more fully, we um for a long time we debated about killing off a major character because we didn't want people to think that automatically all of our main people would make it to the end of every book. And now and then Doug would say, "Should we kill off Pendergast?" And I'd say, "No, no, that's a bridge too far." But we thought about Margot Green from Relic, and we lurked on a bulletin board and asked about her, under anonymously, and we got so many negative responses. So finally, we got a lot of people telling us, why did you get rid of that Smith bag? He's a he's so full of himself. He's a boring character. And that we were hurt by that because we sort of saw Smithback as ourselves in a lot of ways. We gave him our best lines, and we're certainly not Pendergast, much as we'd like to be. And so we finally got rid of him. And Doug said, let's make sure we get rid of him so the reader knows it. So we had an autopsy. And the more books that have passed since, the more we regret his demise because he was a great sounding board and he was always there. And I don't think Skip is pulling his weight in the Nora Kelly books, although you may take umbrage over that, but so we've heard from some people. Anyway, yes, we do mourn his passing, but it's like life, it happened and we can't do anything about it now.
Well, Deborah asks that please allow Pendergast to live. And we did receive a couple of questions, and I know this is a hard question to ask, but are there any plans for Pendergast movies in the future?
well, it's interesting you should say that because Paramount made the first movie Relic, and because they did that, they retained all the rights to the characters in the novel. So even though they cut Pendergast out of the movie, they still have rights to his character. And we've now got 22 Pendergast books that have been published. But unfortunately, that no movies could be made of those books unless Paramount did it. So we just heard from Paramount that they are going to do a series, a television series based on Pendergast. And so we are extremely excited about that. We think we have every reason to believe they're going to do a wonderful job. And it'll be shown on Paramount Plus. So, but it's just in the early stages. There may be a year or two before you see anything.
That's great.
We're very excited because you can't believe how many times we've almost had a second film made, or almost had a TV series made. And, we have so many Pendergast books with so many, we think, good plots to them. But something in the past has always come along to put the kibosh on it. And hopefully this time, on it, the writer's strike or nothing else will cause a problem.
Yeah. If you had anyone that you'd like to play that, do you have anyone in mind, any actor in mind to play him?
I have such a clear view of Pendergast. I don't know anybody who could play him, but I'll turn that over to Lincoln because he has more ideas.
Well, we've been asked that question a lot over the years, and in fact, we've been asked it so many times that the actors we suggested have aged out of the role.
Yeah.
Um, once upon a time, I thought Christopher Walken would have been really good. I liked his character in this film The Dogs of War, which wasn't a well-known movie. And then for a while we thought that Benedict Cumberbatch would be good. And for a while earlier than that, we thought, oh God, what is his name? The guy who played Commissioner Gordon.
Christian Bale, Christian Bale.
No, who played the commissioner. He was also in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Gary Oldman.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
old, yeah.
A younger Gary Oldman, I think, would have done a great job. He's a superb actor. Right now, I don't know. I think we should let the people who are watching make their suggestions, because right now the casting door is wide open.
Yeah. Put your suggestions in the chat. Let us see what you think.
Yeah, definitely. It could also be an up and coming actor we don't know yet.
Timothy,
I kind of
Timothy
like that idea.
Chalamet.
I like that idea.
Yeah. That would be actually a great idea. Somebody who nobody knows. Liam Neeson, he may have done one too many Taken films. I don't know.
How about Timothy Chalamet? That's someone suggested that him.
Who's that?
Omar, do you know who that is?
Yes, he's in the new Dune movies.
Dune.
Yeah,
That was good. All right. Yeah, he actually that's a good suggestion.
yeah. Oh, someone says I think it's Tim Hiddleston. I think it's Tom Hiddleston. He's in the Marvel movies. I think he plays Loki.
Yes, that's a good choice. Or look at Cumberbatch, and wasn't he Doctor Strange? I mean,
Yeah.
that that was Pendergast to a T, except for the clothing.
Yeah.
He just has to
all
be
the
able
magic
to.
tricks.
Whoever plays Pendergast has to be able to imitate the beautiful and very rare New Orleans accent that Pendergast has, which is not your standard Southern accent. It's a very beautiful, smooth, honeyed accent that very few people have ever heard because only a small number of people actually speak that way.
Mhm.
Somebody suggested David Byrne. Isn't that the guy from Talking Heads?
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Well,
Oh yeah. Maybe they mean someone else.
he might start going like this. That's an 80s reference. Probably nobody even gets that.
Heather asks, for Lincoln, when will we see the next installment for Jeremy Logan?
Thank you for asking that question. The last installment of my supernatural sleuth, Jeremy Logan, was Chrysalis. And that was a book, I'll keep this brief, where I was talking to some doctors and I learned that medical implants like pacemakers have firmware updates, just like your phone. And I thought, wow, what if those go wrong, or somebody updates a bad, virus or something? And so I combined that idea with virtual reality, which I feel is not ready for prime time yet, but when it is, it's going to take over just in the same way Napster led to streaming movies. And I put those two ideas together and they came out a bit more complicated than I wanted them to. And so for anybody who found that book a little bit of a slog, I apologize. I like it, but I know it wasn't slam bang action every page. And so the next book I do will be a lot more back to the roots, haunted house story. I don't dare tell you anything about it because I think the idea is so good, somebody might steal it. But I'm going to take my time and do it right. And when it comes out, you'll all know about it because I won't stop talking about it. Thank you very much for asking, though. And Doug has a novel of his own, Extinction, coming out, I believe, next year, right?
Yes, in April.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Doug. I'm sorry.
No, it's coming out next year. It's called Extinction. I'm not going to tell you anything about it.
We do have Robert in the Q&A who's excited for Extinction. And we have someone who's asked, oh, I lost the question. It was sort of a two-parter here. Oh, Catherine asks, I've always been fascinated by what Diogenes, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that character's name, saw in the box. How did you decide what to tell and what to leave to readers' imagination?
Well, Diogenes,
Diogenes.
he was named after the ancient Greek philosopher named Diogenes, who lived in Athens, and he used to carry around a lantern looking for an honest man and never found him. And he lived in a jar, a big clay jar. And at one point, he became famous. And at one point, Alexander the Great went to visit him and was standing over him and said, Diogenes, what can I do for you? What would you like me to do? And Diogenes said, please step outside. Your shadow is falling on me. I need the sun, or something like that. So he was very rude. Luckily, Alexander didn't order him executed on the spot. So Diogenes is Pendergast's brother, and he is Pendergast's dark twin in a way.
Doug, if I could pause you for 1 second, is there any way that we could get Omar to get a bit more clarity on that question in terms of what Diogenes put in and left out? I'm not sure I follow what we put in and left out, or what he, and in some particular book, he put in and left out. Okay, go ahead.
Let me look back at the question. Where did it go? Yeah, so the first sentence said, always been fascinated by what Diogenes saw in the box. And then the question was, how did you decide what to tell and what to leave to readers' imagination?
Lincoln?
That, I'm afraid that may have been my idea, at least certainly in part. We felt we had to have an explanation for why Diogenes was the way he turned out. And it would take too long to explain how he even came into being. It wasn't intentional, but we decided that there's one of their ancestors was a magician and a mountebank, and he has one of his old magic contraptions in the basement, and Aloysius Pendergast goaded his brother into getting into one of them, which was like a chamber of horrors, and he saw something awful in there that before his brother could get him out, that changed him forever, and he never forgave his older brother, and his older brother, who's Pendergast, has always felt guilty. But as to what we left in and put and what we left out, that's really, I think, a good writer of horror or thrillers. They know that what you don't show is always worse than what you show, because the author's imagination, the reader's imagination is always better than anything we could think of. And there are certain masters of that, like M.R. James and others we've learned from. And I can prove it to you. If you remember any films where there's a scene like that, where somebody looks at something awful and then shrieks and goes crazy, but they don't show it, and you're upset. Think of the films where they look at it and shriek, and then you see it and you're disappointed. The one time I was not disappointed in the monster was in the Japanese version of Ringu, and that will haunt me for the rest of my days. And that wasn't even, it had no tentacles. So that's a long-winded answer to your question.
Great. This question I'm not too sure about. It might be a plot related question. Maybe you guys can figure it out. Linda asks, was it difficult to decide on the sorry, was it difficult to decide on the depiction of your characters in the collector cards?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question because, we worked with the artist Bernard Lee on that, and we tried. We took photographs of characters, we descriptions, and we tried to, as much as possible, to sort of describe how the characters look. And I think he came pretty close. Not entirely for me with every character. He really nailed Agent Coldmoon. He really nailed him. That was
Yes.
really good.
Yep.
And he did pretty well with Pendergast. I'm not really happy entirely with how Constance Green looks. But that's just me. I mean, I have a vision of her in my head that's different from his vision. So
He has a tough job. I mean, he just did Nora and Corrie in the latest collection. And, Doug and I sometimes have very clear pictures in our minds. Sometimes we don't have clear pictures, but we know what they don't look like. And so I think both of us applaud his work because he's really been very amenable to suggestions of ours and done a great job. And we're very happy, as Doug said, particularly with Coldmoon. He really knocked that one out of the park.
Oh, and the other one he knocked out of the park, Lincoln, I think you'll agree with me, is Dr. Lang. That was so awesome. That was so good that it actually obscured my idea of what Lang looked like. And now when I think of Lang, I see his illustration with those violet tinted glasses and his top hat. And oh, he was very creepy.
Well, I'll close it out with one last question. Bill asks, is there any chance for forgiveness with the Pendergast brothers?
That's a very good question. And not to give anything away, but the book we're writing, at least this is the plan, is going to wrap up the story of the Pendergast brothers in a way. And forgiveness, I'm not sure. Doug and I will have to talk about that because we haven't finished it yet. But understanding, acceptance maybe would be a good word. I don't know. What do you think, Doug?
It's a very strange resolution to their relationship, which is going to surprise the reader enormously. I don't think there's going to be forgiveness. Sorry, Link. Too much water under the dam, or under the dam, no, over the dam, under the bridge.
Under the bridge.
Sorry.
And then over the dam.
Thank you. But anyway, but it's a resolution that is utterly original and unique, and that's all we can say about it.
And I will say that we will argue a little bit about whether if there's forgiveness or not. It's not entirely decided, but there'll be some kind of resolution, and it will certainly be satisfactory. That we promise you.
Great. Well, we will leave it there. Thank you so much, Douglas and Lincoln, for having us for having us here to be part of this conversation, for hosting you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Omar, and thank you to the Mark Twain House for inviting us. It's a great institution, and they do a great job. And I hope people who are tuning in virtually will visit it. And thank all of you for participating in this. It's because of you that we can write these books, and it's your enthusiasm that keeps us going. So thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. I second that. The Mark Twain House is is a fantastic organization, and
Yes, thank you.
well worth
I will,
supporting.
Howard. Thank you.
Yes,
you,
please,
Howard.
please stay safe. And to all our audience, I put in a link in the chat to purchase Dead Mountain. And please join us again in the future. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Omar.
Thank you.